November 1967, outside Lubbock, Texas. A cotton farmer named Walter walks into a Ford dealership with a stack of bills wrapped in a rubber band and pays $1,795 for a brand new F-250 with the 352 V8. $1,795. That truck hauled cotton trailers, pulled stumps, and ran irrigation pumps until 2009. 42 years on the same long block. Today, the cheapest new F-250 you can roll off a Ford lot starts at $62,000, and the dealer will tell you with a straight face that you need a software subscription to keep the heated steering wheel working past the warranty. 4 trucks built before the lawyers got involved, 4 trucks the auction houses are still ignoring in 2024. One of them logged over 400,000 miles in a Nebraska feedlot before its first valve job, documented by Popular Mechanics in a 1981 longevity survey. Another one, according to U.S. Army procurement records, was rated for continuous operation in temperatures from 40 below to 120 above with no engine modifications. And the 4th was so overbuilt that Detroit executives at General Motors, in internal memos later cited in congressional hearings on planned obsolescence, complained it was lasting too long to support replacement cycles. That word, replacement, is the whole story. Detroit didn't forget how to build these trucks. They chose to stop. The marketing departments at the Big Three, the dealer networks pushing 3-year trade-in cycles, the magazines selling ad space to whoever was launching the newest chrome-laden half-ton, they all decided together that a truck which lasts 40 years is bad for business. If you've ever fixed something with your own 2 hands instead of throwing it away, hit that subscribe button because this channel is for you, and these 4 trucks are about to remind you what your father already knew. Number 4, the 1972 through 1980 Dodge D200 with the 318 LAV8. In the years after the oil embargo, when everybody was scared of gas prices and the Big Three were panicking, Dodge kept quietly building a 3/4-ton work truck for men who didn't have time to panic. These trucks went to ranch hands in eastern Montana, to plumbers in Wichita, to volunteer fire departments in small Pennsylvania coal towns that couldn't afford the Ford or the Chevy. Working class through and through, nobody bought a D200 to impress anybody at church. A 1974 D200, base trim, long bed, no power steering, listed for $3,280. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the average weekly wage for a manufacturing worker that year was around $176. So roughly 18 weeks of work bought you a truck you could rebuild in your driveway with a Sears socket set. It is 6 in the morning in February, somewhere outside Bismarck. The Dodge has been sitting in 12-degree air all night. The driver pulls the choke, taps the gas twice, and turns the key. The 318 grunts, coughs once, and settles into that loping idle that smells faintly of unburned gasoline and old vinyl. His hands, cracked from the cold, rest on a steering wheel thin as a broomstick. The heater takes 10 minutes. He doesn't care. The 318 LA, according to Chrysler engineering documentation referenced by Motor Trend in 1978, was rated for an expected service life of 250,000 miles before any major internal work. Forged crankshaft, cast iron everything. The block was so overbuilt that high-performance shops in the 1990s were still pulling 318S out of junkyard D200S and stroking them for race motors. Then Dodge got bought, then bought again, and the Ram brand pivoted toward leather seats and lifestyle marketing. The cheapest new Ram, 2,500 today, crosses $55,000 and comes with an aluminum block engine that requires a dealer-only diagnostic computer for a tune-up. The D200 didn't disappear. It got replaced by something prettier, weaker, and 10 times harder to fix. A man who could keep a D200 running could keep his life running. That's what we lost. Number 3, the 1967 through 1972 Chevrolet C20 with the 292 inline-six. This is the truck that built the suburbs. While the C10 got the magazine covers and the muscle truck reputation, the heavier C20, ordered with the long 6-cylinder instead of the V8, went to school districts, to county road crews, to the small contractor in southern Indiana who needed something that would start every morning for 20 years and never embarrass him in front of a bank loan officer. A 1969 C20 with the 292 6 and a 4-speed granny gear, stickered for $2,640. Average weekly wage that year, per BLS data, was around $115. About 23 weeks of honest labor. It is August in Mississippi. The truck sits in a gravel lot behind a lumber yard, the bed half loaded with 2x4s that smell like fresh pine sap mixed with chainsaw bar oil. The driver climbs in, his shirt already soaked through, and the metal seat springs creak under him. He cranks the 292. It does not roar. It hums, a long, patient, agricultural hum that says it could keep humming until the sun burned out. The 292 inline-six was, according to a 1971 Popular Mechanics endurance test, capable of running at 3,000 RPM continuously for over 200 hours without measurable wear. 7 main bearings, solid lifters, a timing gear made of steel, not nylon. Chevrolet engineers designed it for industrial use, such as irrigation pumps, generators, and school buses, and dropped it into the C20 because they could. Then came the smog regulations of 1973, and Chevrolet quietly choked the 292 with emissions hardware that cut its torque and complicated its tune-up. By 1979, it was gone, replaced by a softer, smaller V6 that was easier to certify and harder to love. The Silverado of today, with its turbocharged 4-cylinder and 10-speed transmission, would crumble doing what a 292 did before lunch. The men who drove these trucks did not talk about reliability. They did not have a word for it. It was just the truck. That is the loss. Number 2, the 1961 through 1971 International Harvester Scout 80 and 800 with the 152 Comanche 4-cylinder. International Harvester didn't build trucks for cowboys in Cologne commercials. They built them for the man who actually owned the cows. The Scout went to ranchers in Wyoming, to fence line repair crews in West Texas, to Forest Service workers in the Cascades, to the kind of veteran who came back from Korea, bought 40 acres in Missouri, and needed something that could go anywhere and be fixed with a crescent wrench. A 1964 Scout 80, base model, 4-wheel drive, listed for $2,070. Per BLS, weekly manufacturing wage that year was around $102. 20 weeks of work for a 4-wheel drive vehicle the U.S. Army later tested in Arctic conditions and rated comparable to a Jeep at half the maintenance burden. It is October in the Bighorn foothills. Frost on the windshield. The driver, a sheep rancher whose father homesteaded the same ground, scrapes the glass with the back of a leather glove and climbs in. The 152 4-banger fires on the second crank, shaking the whole cab in a steady rhythm that vibrates up through the floor pan and into his boots. He smells canvas, gun oil, and gasoline. He puts it in low range and rolls out into a pasture no modern crossover could survive. The 152 Comanche was a slant 4, essentially half of International's V8 truck engine. Cast iron block, forged internals designed for agricultural duty. According to a 1969 Road and Track Field report, Scouts with this engine were routinely logging over 180,000 miles in working conditions before requiring a rebuild, at a time when the average American passenger car was scrapped at $90,000. International Harvester, choked by labor disputes and unable to compete with Detroit's marketing budgets, exited the consumer truck business in 1980. The Scout was killed by Ford Bronco television ads, by Chevy Blazer dealer incentives, by a culture that started buying four-wheel drives to look at, not to use. Now, before we get to the last one, you need to understand something. In 1972, General Motors circulated an internal product planning document, pieces of which surfaced years later in industry trade press, that openly discussed shortening the expected service life of light trucks from 15 years to 7. Not because the engineering required it, because the accounting did. The argument was simple: a truck that lasts 15 years is a truck a man only buys twice in his working life. A truck that lasts 7 is a truck he buys 4 times. The same logic was adopted at Ford and Chrysler within the decade. They didn't call it planned obsolescence in public. They called it improved styling cycles and modernized customer expectations. The men running those companies, guys in suits who had never bled a brake line in their lives, decided that the American working man was buying trucks too infrequently. So they fixed it. They put plastic timing gears in engines that used to have steel ones. They moved to electronic ignitions that needed dealer service. They added vacuum actuated this and computer controlled that. And within 15 years, a man with a toolbox in his garage couldn't fix his own truck anymore. That wasn't progress. That was theft. And every truck on this list is a witness to what we had before the theft happened. Number 1, the 1973 through 1979 Ford F100 and F250 with the 300 inline-six. If your grandfather owned a truck, there is a real chance it was this one. Light blue, faded white, primer gray, parked beside a barn in Ohio, a single wide in Alabama, a brick Rambler outside Scranton. This is the truck of the American working man between the oil crisis and the Reagan recession. Plumbers drove them, carpenters drove them, Pacific veterans who had come home 30 years earlier and worked the same job at the same plant for 30 more years drove them to retirement and then drove them another 15 years after that. A 1975 F100 with the 306, 3 on the tree, no air conditioning, stickered for $3,390. Bureau of Labor Statistics put the average weekly wage that year at around $190. About 18 weeks. The same 18 weeks Walter the cotton farmer worked in 1967. The math of the working man hadn't changed yet. It is 5:30 in the morning, late September, in a gravel driveway outside Springfield, Missouri. A retired mill worker walks out in a flannel shirt with a thermos of black coffee. The Ford is 28 years old. It started yesterday. It will start today. He turns the key and the 306 rumbles to life with that low, even, almost diesel-like cadence. The smell of cool dew on hot exhaust. The vibration of 7 main bearings spinning in cast iron. He puts his hand on the wheel, the same wheel his hand has rested on for 2 decades, and he goes. The Ford 300 inline-six is the most documented long-life gasoline engine in American light truck history. Popular Mechanics, in a 1989 retrospective, cited multiple verified examples crossing 400,000 miles on original bottom ends. Nebraska farmers ran them on irrigation pumps for 30 years straight. The U.S. Forest Service kept them in service in remote stations until parts availability finally forced retirement in the late 1990s. Modern people, raised on lease cycles and infotainment screens, cannot understand a machine designed without a built-in expiration date. They have never known one. Ford killed the 306 in 1996, replaced it with the Triton V8, an engine that became famous for spitting spark plugs out of its aluminum heads. The F-150 of today starts at $38,000, weighs 5,000 pounds, and depends on a turbocharged V6 with a timing chain known to stretch by 90,000 miles. The 306 F100 is the truck most viewers of this channel saw parked at their grandfather's house. It is the truck that taught a generation of American boys what an engine sounded like. And it is gone. Not because it failed, but because it succeeded too well. I tried to buy one last spring, found a 1978 F100 with the 306 in a barn outside Roanoke, Virginia. Owner had passed. His son wanted $2,800 for it. By the time I drove out, 3 other men had already called. One of them was a mechanic in his 60s who told me he'd been looking for 2 years. He got it. I shook his hand and drove home in something newer and worse. So here is the challenge. This weekend, drive the back roads in your county. Look behind the barns, in the side yards of the old farmhouses, at the edges of the gravel lots behind small machine shops. One of these 4 trucks is still out there, still running, still waiting. Find it. Or call your father, your uncle, the old neighbor down the road, and ask him what it felt like to drive one when it was new. Tell me in the comments which one your family drove. The Dodge, the Chevy, the Scout, or the Ford. I want to know which states still remember these trucks, which towns still have one parked out back. Tell me what your grandfather kept running and how long he kept it running. These weren't just trucks. They were proof that an American man with a wrench, a driveway, and a Saturday morning could keep his own life moving without asking permission from anybody. That is what we are losing, and that is worth remembering.